If you let mommy work, we'll go to the PARK. Play with a BALL. Hello, friend. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. If you are new here, hi, my name is Carrie. I am a TV host and I live in Kansas City, Missouri. Summer is over, y'all. It really is. It came and went. Actually, technically, summer doesn't end until September 21st. So there is still a couple more days left, but in my opinion, the months go like this. Winter months are December, January, February. Spring months are March, April, May. Summer months are June, July, and August. And then fall months are September, October, November. That's how it's divvied up in my opinion. So today I am going to go through and give you my thoughts, opinions, reviews about all the books I read in summer 2024. In the course of those 3 months, I read 15 books. Honestly, that's a really good number for me. I tend to read about 50 books a year, give or take, but I do the majority of my reading in the cold winter months. That is mostly because it's just, there's more darkness then, and it's colder outside. I live in the Midwest. I don't want to be outside in the cold, winter months. So I tend to read a lot in December, January, February, and the summer months, I don't really read a ton because I'm an outdoorsy girl. I would rather be outside soaking up the sun, being active, spending time with my dog, just doing all the things. So for the most part in summer is when I read the least. So the fact that I was able to knock out 15 books in these 3 months is pretty good for me. All right, let's jump right into the books because like I said, I got 15 of them to get to. The first book that I read in June was Funny Story by Emily Henry. I feel like there are Emily Henry lovers and then there are Emily Henry haters. And in this particular instance, I happen to be Switzerland. I'm pretty neutral, to be honest with you. I don't love her books, but I also don't hate them. I find them to be very middle of the road. I've read all her books and some of them escape me. The plots are very basic. There's nothing about it that stands out to me, but yet while I'm reading them, I have a pretty good time. And that is exactly how I would categorize this book as well. Our female main character is Daphne, and she is in a relationship with a man named Peter, but all of a sudden he dumps her one day and goes back to his childhood best friend who he actually ends up being in love with. Her name is Petra, and Daphne is heartbroken, and what she ends up having to do is move out of the place that they are living into and move into the place of Petra's ex-boyfriend. Petra broke up with her boyfriend to go be with Peter, so both Daphne and Petra's ex, whose name is Miles, end up living together because they're both kind of up shit creek without a paddle. I ended up giving it a solid 3.5 stars, which is a basic run-of-the-mill road where it's I enjoyed myself whilst reading this. Was I particularly drawn to the plot or the characters? No, but I did enjoy myself. The next book in June that I read is called Expiration Dates by Rebecca Serle. I have to say, this was my first foray into Rebecca Serle, and I have been missing out because I adored this book. I don't know how I've never read anything by her before. She's had other books that have been very, very popular. In 5 Years was a huge hit a couple years ago. One Italian Summer was a huge hit. I don't know how she flew under my radar for so long, but I loved this book so much that I'm gonna go back and try and read those previous books. Our main character is Daphne, and she is living and working in Los Angeles, California, and every time she meets a man that she's gonna be romantically involved with, she receives a piece of paper with their name on it and the exact amount of time that she is to spend with them. There's another key character in this book named Hugo, who is a man that she dated, but they broke up and now they are just best friends, and he plays a big role in this book as well. But she's kind of used this little caveat to her life as an excuse and as armor to protect herself as she's gone along. Yes, there is a dating undercurrent to this book, but in my opinion, it was so much more kind of coming of age, and it was more about Daphne as a person than it was about her, finding happily ever after. It was really surprising. It caught me off guard, and I really, really loved it. I ended up giving this book 5 stars because I thought the writing was beautiful. I thought the story was captivating. I liked Daphne as a main character, and it just had all the elements, in my opinion, that make a book something that's memorable to me. This is probably not going to be on the short list for one of my best books of the year. It's a really memorable book. I really enjoyed myself. The other thing I liked about this book is it is petite. This book is 272 pages and there is not wasted time in it at all, which I appreciate. I hate when authors write 400-page books that could have been like 300-page books. Like, it's just, please don't do that. Like, she didn't waste any space in this book and I appreciate that as a reader. Like I said, 5 stars, can't recommend enough. Please go read it. I think you'll love it. The next book I read is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. The book revolves around our main character, Lucy, but it also revolves around her friendship with a girl named Savvy, who was murdered. And so they're kind of going back in time and we're seeing their relationship as it was before, and then we're seeing Lucy kind of deal with the fallout of Savvy's death. And then a man named Ben comes to town and he wants to do a true crime podcast basically on the death of Savvy. And the key is that everyone thinks that Lucy killed her friend Savvy, and Ben is like, no, I'm gonna do this podcast and we're gonna prove to people that you didn't kill her. And it would be easy, but Lucy has really bad amnesia about that night, so she doesn't think she killed Savvy, but also she can't be 100% certain she didn't. So while she believes she didn't do it, she also is like, maybe I did, like blah, 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 blah. So there's all this untangling and interviews with people on the podcast and all sorts of things like that. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I really did enjoy myself while reading it, and I think it's a solid thriller, especially in a sea of like average thrillers, which seems to be the climate these days. But I did remove 1 star because this was so close to none of this is true. Like, it was so close. Like, I think if I would have read this before none of this is true, I would have been like, oh, this is a really original like plot and theme, but it was so close to that one that I had already kind of seen it done before and I couldn't give it 5 stars. But overall, solid. The next book I read, or rather I listened to this one, is Down the Drain by Julia Fox. Oh my God, this book. In general, I prefer to listen to memoirs because there's really nothing like hearing someone tell their story through their voice. So all the memoirs I've read this year, I've actually listened to, and I really do recommend that. And oh my gosh, definitely for this one. This woman's life is insane. I was really just knew of Julia Fox peripherally through Kanye West, but she was very well known in this New York kind of circle, and she's really made a name for herself, and her life is crazy. The fact that this woman is still alive and has kind of like risen from the ashes into the phoenix is absolutely crazy. Overall, like, while I was reading it, I was like, this girl's crazy. On the other hand, I was like, this girl is scrappy. Like, she is scrappy, and she has earned every little thing she's ever gotten in this life. And I respect that. I really do. She's a hustler, and she's someone who, like I said, has made a way for herself just by grit and clawing her way through. So 5 stars, go listen to it. It'll blow your mind. All right, the next book on my list is Love, Pamela by Pamela Anderson. So when Pam and Tommy, the TV show, came out, of course I watched it like a lot of other people, and it really thrust her back into the spotlight with the story of her sex tape with Tommy Lee for a generation like me who didn't see that unfold in real time. I got to watch it, you know, on the screen. Of course, it was, you know, a dramatized version of that. It was a TV show, but it was based on all that, and it was pretty factual to what happened. So I got to see that all in real time, and it really brought her story to the forefront for maybe younger millennials, and then of course Gen Z. And after Pam and Tommy came out, she was thrust back into the spotlight again. She was back to being a super hot commodity. Everyone wanted her on their podcast. Every magazine wanted to do an interview with her. All the, you know, the news shows, ABC, NBC, like they were all trying to get her on like Good Morning America. Like, she was such a hot commodity because people wanted her take on Pam and Tommy on the show that was coming out. And she was very openly honest that that part of her life was behind her, and she really didn't want to address it. She was very tight-lipped, and I respected her for that because it seemed like she has moved on from that part and she has no need to go back and relive it. But this is what I think about this book. I think that Pam's team came to her and they were like, look, you are never gonna be this hot again. Like, people want you right now. And I think that they told her to keep her mouth shut And instead of doing interviews with every person who will have her, keep your mouth shut and let's write a memoir and let's sell it for a big payday. And I think that's why she wrote this book. And I think that's great. I'm glad she got paid. And I think that's overall really good advice. But to be honest with you, she didn't have a ton to say in this book, if that makes sense, in my opinion. It was nice to hear about her upbringing and how she got discovered. And she did talk some about the Playboy Mansion and Hugh Hefner and some of that, which is always interesting to hear about. But she didn't, you know, say a whole lot about the Pam and Tommy situation that we didn't already know via the show or via like hearsay and what's come out since then. So there wasn't really a ton of like juicy new information about that, if that's what you're looking for. And to be honest with you, the thing that I got from her memoir, which makes me so happy, honestly, is that she's super happy with her life right now. She's super happy being a mom. She's got 2 sons that she is obsessed with. She's super into animal welfare and animal rights, and that's a huge part of her life. And she's super into like just being herself, and she loves being outdoors, and she, you know, just like she seems so happy and content with where she is in her life right now. So that's what I got out of this book, is she's just so happy. So I don't know that like there wasn't anything in this book. I think that she's over all that stuff. Like I think she's over the sex tape. I think she's over all the bullshit she went through in the 90s and the way she was treated in this industry. Like I think she's over that. And so she didn't have like a ton to say about it to make it really juicy. You know, a lot of these memoirs, much like Julia Fox's, they're so good because they blow your mind. They blow your mind. She didn't blow my mind because I think she's just made peace with it all, which from a book standpoint is not salacious and page turning, but from being a human in the world standpoint, like good for her, like bravo. Like she seems so happy and content in her life, and I'm so happy for her to have that. The book as a whole is like 3.5 stars, but Pam being happy and just thriving in her life right now, like that, in my opinion, is worth 5 stars. The next book I read is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. So earlier this year, I finally read Fourth Wing, and it was incredible. I gave it 5 stars. She writes in a way that just entrances you in that world, and you just get lost. So I was very, very excited, especially the way the Fourth Wing ended, you know, if you know, you know. But I was really excited for Iron Flame and to see where things went. That being said, I didn't like this one as much. I still really enjoyed it, don't get me wrong. These characters are great. This world is great. To be honest with you, Xaden annoyed me way more in this book. One of the things I loved about Xaden so much in Fourth Wing is that he pushed Violet when other people were like, no, she's too fragile, like she can't do this. Xaden was like, no, like, let her go out there, she can do this. And she rose to the occasion every time and ended up being a badass bitch. In this book, I felt like Xaden was like at every corner trying to be like, protect her, like meh, meh. And it's like, dude, this is so different than how you were in the first book. Like he annoyed me so much more in this book. That's number one. The second thing is this book, I felt like it was too long. Like I just felt like she could have condensed it a little bit. And I'm not a fan of making books long just to make them long for like, you know, the sake of them being like, oh, it's so thick, it's so many words. Like that's not me at all. I felt like this was too long. I wasn't as entranced in this one, I will say that. I enjoyed myself. I ended up giving it 4 stars, but Fourth Wing was such a home run for me. Like I was lost in Fourth Wing. And this one, I was just kind of like, meh, here we are. Like, we're reading, here we are. Like, that's the difference. Overall, 4 stars. The next book I read is called The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. This book is super interesting and kind of genre bending. Our main character is a woman, and to be honest with you, we never hear her name, like she never gets a name, but she is working for like the British government, and they are going back into time and saving people from time in history that would have died, and they're grabbing them right before they die and bringing them to the future to try and assimilate them to culture here to see if they can live here and so forth. And so the woman who's our main character, she ends up getting assigned a guy named Graham Gore, and he is brought back from a ship. He's on some ship way back in the day. They bring him back, and her job is to live with him and help him assimilate to the culture and help him try to be a person in the world, and to just help them navigate that situation. And it kind of progresses from there. She realizes that this, you know, experiment that she's a part of is not maybe as ethical as it could be. She realizes there's, you know, some things that, you know, people are hiding from her, people aren't being truthful about, and it kind of goes from there. This book was a lot of different things. There's obviously some magical realism in it. There is some historical fiction in it. There is some love in it. Like, there were a lot of things going on in this book at one time. The writing style of this book was really interesting to me. I don't know if I liked it, but it was interesting. And just the plot of this was interesting. Like, the more I read, the more I value unique plot lines and unique storylines, and this definitely was one. That being said, I think there were a lot of holes in the time travel aspect of this. I really like time travel as a book element, but it has to be fully fleshed out of like how the rules of the time travel, like what is allowed and what is not allowed. Like, those things need to be fully fleshed out for me. Otherwise I get hung up on those details and I get annoyed as a reader. And I felt like there were a lot of those rules that were just very like ambiguous, and there was a lot of things that I had questions about that weren't being answered. I feel like for me, this lands somewhere between 3.5 to 4 stars. In some ways, I think it's really profound. And there were like snippets in this book that I read a couple times because they were just like beautiful. They were beautiful words, beautiful lines put together, and I appreciated that as someone who loves literature. But then there were other times where I was like, what the hell is going on here? So because of that, it lands somewhere between the 3.5 to 4 stars for me. All right, next up we have The Housemaid is Watching by Frieda McFadden. This is the 3rd book in the Housemaid series. The first one I really loved, like everyone else. The second one was very, very, very similar to the first one, so it just felt like a regurgitation. In this 3rd book, Millie is living in the suburbs with her husband Enzo. They have 2 kids and they are kind of going about their lives in suburbia, being normal, as they say. I'm just really done with Millie doing the same shit over and over again. And to be honest with you, I want Millie to live happily ever after. Like, she's been through some shit. She really has as a character. And Frieda, on behalf of your readers, please, let's let Millie live happily ever after. I would really love that for her. If you want to continue this like series, this saga, Millie has a daughter and a son. Pass this plot line onto Millie's daughter or onto her son or something. But like, I think we really need to let Millie live happily ever after. I don't know how many times we can regurgitate the same thing over and over again. It was not it for me. 2 stars. 2 stars is all I can give it. All right, next up we have The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I have read a handful of Christina Lauren's books, and they're either, for me, really cheesy and just like not it, or they're pretty good. Like it's like one or the other. Like, I've almost never had one that's like middle of the road. And I have to say, I think this one was pretty good. I really enjoyed myself. It is a really good beach, like summertime read. It is light and fun. There's a romance, of course, but also the 2 characters in this, Liam and Anna, I think her name is, they had some of the best banter I have ever read in a book. Like, I loved their banter. I laughed out loud in a couple parts, which is like hard for me to do because I don't love chick lit, but like their banter was so good. And for me, that was fun. It was really fun. And it seemed like they were friends. Like, I liked that they were friends and that they got along, and that, you know, obviously kind of goes from there. Liam's family is super wealthy. They have to pretend to be married, but for him to get his inheritance, blah, 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 blah. Anna, his dad is sick. She needs, you know, money to pay for his medical bills. Liam is like, oh, I'll pay you to come pretend to be my wife at my family's wedding, blah, 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 blah. Like, typical basic stuff. But even though the plot line like wasn't anything like super extraordinary that I haven't seen before, the 2 characters were really done beautifully, and I loved the location. Of course, it's in some tropical destination, which just makes it fun, and so I really enjoyed this one. 4.5 stars for me on this one. It was enjoyable. I really liked it. All right, the next book I read is called Birdie and Harlow, Life, Loss, and Loving My Dog So Much I Didn't Want Kids Until I Did. It's by Taylor Wolfe. So Taylor Wolfe is a blogger that I used to read her blog back in the day. Like, I'm talking about like 2011, when blogs were like something that people didn't know what they were. Like, I was reading blogs, I had a blog. She was one that I read, and she's hilarious. She's a comedian. And when I saw that she wrote a book and it had to do with her dog Harlow, who I remember her talking about so much, I knew I wanted to pick it up and read it. And it's not a long read. I saw it in my library. I grabbed it one day. I will say a lot of this is about Harlow, her dog, but a lot of it is about motherhood and her struggle into like assimilating into motherhood. And I'm gonna be honest with you and tell you that I liked the dog parts a lot, and I really breezed over the mom parts. She went into a lot of detail at times about her baby's growing development and stuff that I had no freaking clue what she was talking about, and I just didn't have any interest in what she was talking about, to be honest with you. So I really breezed over those parts because I didn't understand or care, to be honest with you. And then she started talking about when they got Harlow's cancer diagnosis and as he started going downhill. And to be honest with you, my dog Gatsby, the love of my life, passed away suddenly from cancer as well. So yeah, I couldn't finish this book in certain parts because it was a little triggering for me going through that with my dog. That being said, I love her relationship with Harlow, and it really spoke to me because that was how my relationship with Gatsby, and he was my best friend. And so to read about her experience with Harlow was really beautiful and really special. It's hard for me to put a rating on this. The dog chapters were a 5. The mom chapters were kind of like a 2.5. So I don't know, 3.5, meet in the middle. I don't know. All right, the next book I read is called Real Americans by Rachel Khong. I'm trying to decide how to describe this book. This book is broken up into 3 different sections. Lily is one section, and she is in her early 20s. She gets an unpaid internship in New York City around the Y2K time, and she meets this man named Matthew, and they fall in love. The next section of the book is about a kid named Nick. He's 15 years old in 2021, and we kind of hear about how his life is, you know, intertwined with Lily's life. And then the last section is told from a woman named May's perspective, and she is also, you know, they all have stories that are intertwined together, and you kind of hear the same story but from each of their different perspectives. I will say this, Lily's part of the book was my favorite. I read it so fast. Like, her section, could not stop reading. Nick's section was also pretty good. By the time I got to May's section, I was bored. I felt like the last third of the book went really slow for me, which was so weird because the first 2/3 flew by. Like, I could not put this book down. I found it so interesting. But the last third of the book really dragged for me. This book is really interesting. It deals a lot with social class issues. It deals a lot with family issues, cultural issues. There's some science elements in this. There's obviously some love, some coming of age. Like, this book has a lot of elements tied into one, and it really is a beautiful story. Because the last third dragged so much for me, I couldn't give it 5 stars. I'd have to say 4 to 4.5 stars. But overall, this book is really interesting and really good lit fic. Like, this is good stuff. Like, I think if lit fic is your thing, pick this up and you won't regret it. The next book I read is called The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. So our main character, Lauren, comes home from a bachelorette party one night to find a man who says he's her husband in her home. And she's like, I didn't know I had a husband. She finds out that her attic is an unlimited supply of new husbands. So every time a man goes up the attic, a new one comes down. And she kind of has fun with that. She will keep some around if they're hot or funny or trip her trigger, or if one of them looks at her funny, she'll send them right back up. Again, just a really unique plot line, something that I have not seen done before. And I really did find Lauren, our main character, to be endearing. At times in the middle, I felt it dragged a little bit, just a little bit, not a ton, but it dragged just a little bit. But overall, this book is really fun. I really enjoyed myself, and I do recommend it. If anything I said sounds interesting, you will probably like this book because it was fun and it was enjoyable, and yeah, recommend. 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is called The Rom-Commers by Katherine Center. So Katherine Center has a couple other books. I've only read one of the other ones. The other one I read is called Hello Stranger, and I'm pretty sure I enjoyed myself. I think I gave that 3.5 stars. This one I found to be so cheesy and kind of cringe, honestly. Our main character is Emma, and she is a wannabe writer, and she somehow, in a convoluted way, gets the opportunity to work with this Hollywood writer slash director named Charlie. And she has to basically go live with him for 6 weeks to like fix up this screenplay that he wrote, that is a rom-com obviously, and make it palatable because it is so bad. And he's only trying to write it so that he can make like his murder horror movie. It's kind of confusing. Anyway, this was super cringe. I honestly found it to be really cringe, and I didn't enjoy myself that much. I didn't hate it, but it also, like, when it was done, like, I was pretty glad it was done, honestly. Maybe I'm in the minority in this one. I don't know. I know some people really liked this one, but for me, it was just way too cheesy. I ended up giving it 2 stars. The next book I read is called The 5 a.m. Club by Sharma. I have seen this book floating around for quite a while. I like to read self-help. I like to read self-improvement books. I kind of mix them in there. I read a variety, but I saw this on my library shelf and I picked it up. This was different because it was self-helpy, but it was like written in like a story. Like there were 2 main characters who were like following this person on a journey, and like the 2 main characters, like it was written as a story. So it wasn't traditional self-help, but it did have self-help elements to it. And it was interesting. I mean, the 5 a.m. Club, it's all about waking up early and doing specific things, moving your body. And that's what the recipe to success is, apparently. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing, totally out of the ordinary. The setup was different, having it told in a story type of setting. I whipped through this in like a day. Like it was an easy read, went through it. I could take it or leave it, but some interesting stuff. And last but not least, I read Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I was gonna think about this book because it is a love story, but it is also based on 2 serial killers. Like they fall in love based on their love of killing other people. In their defense, like it's kind of a Dexter situation where they only kill bad people, whatever. But our main character is Rowan and Sloane. Like I said, they are serial killers, and they kind of have this game that they're playing where they meet up once a year to track this one person and try and kill him. The first person that kills him wins, blah, 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 blah. It's kind of like this, they have this relationship where they're friends, but they kind of poke at each other, and they're kind of like egging each other on. What do you know? They end up falling in love. But I ended up liking this more than I thought I was going to. If you can look past the fact that they're like serial killers, this was enjoyable, honestly. And there's another book in the series called Lark and Leather. The side character in this book, her name is Lark. So the next book will be her book, her love story, and I am planning to read that. I ended up giving this one a solid 3.5, almost 4 stars. Like I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this. Me and my girlfriend Bree read this kind of at the same time, and we were both kind of like iffy, like can we swallow this pill of like this book about about serial killers? And we both read it at the same time, and we were both like, meh, pretty good. All right, y'all, those are the 15 books I read this summer in the months of June, July, and August. I have already started making quite a dent in my fall books, so I'm excited to come back and recap those with you. Like I said, the fall months will be September, October, November, so you will see me again at the end of November. Probably it'll be December when I put out my next book video, and I'll recap all the books I read in the fall. If you read any of the books that I mentioned and have thoughts about them, put them down in the comments below because I would always love to hear your opinions. And if you just read a really good book this summer and want to share it with me, I would love to hear it. So again, put that down in the comments below. Tell me the title of the book and the author, and I swear to God, it'll be on my TBR like the second I read your comment, because I am always looking for more books to read. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Reading is just a fun little hobby for me, and I like to share my thoughts on books because I think books are pretty cool. So I'm grateful to anyone who comes by and wants to hear me chat about books. As always, you can find me on social media. I'm at Carrie.Gillespie. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. You can find my professional page on Facebook, but that's really just my TV stuff if you're interested in that at all. But all the fun stuff is on Instagram and TikTok. I'm sending you love wherever you are in the world. Mwah. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so appreciative. I'll see you again very soon in my next video. Bye.